Well, hello and welcome to the Smells Like Money podcast. Join me, Suzanne Chin Taylor, the DooDoo Diva, as I interview guests who are making an impact on how we manage and operate systems for conveying and treating wastewater. As a veteran of the wastewater, trenchless, and civil infrastructure industry, each week I'll be bringing you industry know-how from industry pros who know how. Join me each week as I speak with representatives of organizations that are utilizing disruptive or new technologies and methods, and executives who are excited to share how to be successful and sustainable in our vital industry. So whether you want to learn about the latest trends in technology, in treatment or trenchless, gain tips on training and retaining great talent, or simply how to be more efficient, productive, or profitable, this podcast is for you. Ready? Let's dive right in. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the DooDoo Diva Smells Like Money podcast. We have the great privilege of getting to visit with Denver Stutler again, who is going to share on a couple topics with us, some that are very, very near and dear to my heart. And for those of you who haven't had the chance to listen in or tune in to the prior episodes when Denver was with us, I really encourage you to do so. But for the benefit of those who haven't, just to bring you up to speed, I am going to let Denver give us a very brief description and tell us a little bit about his background, very illustrious career, I may add, before becoming a member of our wonderful industry here. And so without further ado, Denver, take it away.
Suzanne, thank you. I have been enjoying listening to the DooDoo Diva since I've learned about you, and appreciate the guests and the knowledge that I've been able to gain from this experience. I look forward to getting those on Tuesday, and we'll continue to do so. I basically practiced engineering for a dozen years. Been an engineer since the early 90s, and I've enjoyed that career in the wastewater space, mostly working for CDM, Camp Dresser McKee, at that time. And then I had a privilege of serving in the public space, and ultimately ended up running the Florida Department of Transportation. And it taught me a lot about infrastructure and policy making, and how the investments in infrastructure are decided and made in our state and in our country. And then I decided to get into business, and currently serve as the CEO of U.S. Emergent Technologies and SEDivision. U.S. Emergent Technologies does cleaning of wastewater infrastructure. We're proud of our accomplishments, and we're also proud of the fact that we've had some second chance employees work for us, and we're proud of that part of our business. And SEDivision is an engineering firm that helps give visibility to our customers about what's accumulated in tanks. And appreciate the opportunity to come today and talk about the subjects that we talked about previously.
Yes, I mean, you just touched on that with your background, which is why I asked Denver to come back on the show, was his understanding and direct firsthand knowledge of what goes on when it comes to funding for infrastructure and policy making and the politics that can sometimes be involved with this. And you and I chatted offline about how wastewater infrastructure, water infrastructure really is the backbone of our economy. And unfortunately, because for the most part, it's buried, it's an out of sight, out of mind. And because of this, there has been a void or a huge hole that's a disconnect between those who are decision makers, policy makers, politicians, the folks that hold the purse strings, and the people that are responsible for keeping these systems, treatment facilities, all of that infrastructure going and operational. And so what I wanted you to share with us today are your insights and your ideas on how we can effectively bridge that communication disconnect and gap between those who are holding the money and those who need the money to do the stuff that we all need to enjoy the lifestyle that we are privileged to enjoy in this country.
Amen. For sure. Well, first of all, thank you for being passionate about the industry, and I've enjoyed the conversations. I hope that I can encapsulate some of those meaningful thoughts that you and I've bantered back and forth off the air, and hopefully, perhaps even provide a bit of a playbook for those that are the stewards of our wastewater industry.
Right.
And I guess I would say, there's no I in team, and so it is a team effort, and but there's a capital I in infrastructure. So, to begin the conversation and to outline a framework of a playbook for your audience, particularly the utility directors and the stewards of our wastewater infrastructure, I put together a couple I-beams to support their playbook. One, illustrate, invite, illuminate, and insight. And if it's okay, I'll just share briefly just a little bit of what I mean by those. As you pointed out, it's out of sight, out of mind. And on one hand, as professional engineers and designers and keepers of these systems, we take great pride that they don't take up the space and they're not noticed. I tell people all the time, we clean infrastructure everyone uses and no one notices. But what we didn't realize when we built it out of sight, and we were also became a little bit out of mind. I tell people oftentimes potholes get fixed because they are seen and experienced, and as a result, they move up the priority chain. And so, how do we go about, so illustrate? So I'm a big believer that a picture says 1,000 words. It's fundamental to our Set a Vision initiative, is helping our directors sell up the challenges that they have inside of tanks and things like that. Similarly, I think that wherever you can create an illustration for the constituency you serve, and that's the people, we see a lot of really fabulous public programs of informing people with great, sometimes models, scaled models, sometimes illustrations, but sometimes they're not getting to the audience that they need to, and that is sometimes your city council or your commission or your board members or whoever is ultimately responsible. And so that's where I get to invite. And I think that it's imperative to invite the leaders in your community to see the state senators, your representatives, assemblymen and women, and have them come and see the good work that's being done, and pull it from its obscure place and out of sight, out of mind, and give it to them. It's, first of all, it's a fascinating industry. And I've never been involved in a conversation with somebody who's interested in their community that isn't absolutely taken aback by what a wastewater treatment plant does from the inflow to the outflow. And so, and then at the end of the day, illuminate, we said illustrate, invite, illuminate, and insight. Illuminate is, you've got to find a champion. At the end of the day, there are a lot of competing demands for limited resources. But I would argue that, if you don't buy a car, you're not going to be able to get to work if you're in a position where you need a car to get to work and public transit doesn't work for you. So in life, there are investments that need to be made so that we can take care of the long-term benefit. And so infrastructure is a 20, 30, 50-year investment. But in order to have that ongoing investment, it needs to be maintained. We live longer than the life of infrastructure. Political careers are significantly less than the life of infrastructure. We have to look at this as a life cycle issue and not a political term limit issue, and change the framework and illuminate the people who can be champions and give them what they need to fight for those competing demands. And then insight, and I would just say that the insight side of it is that don't be naive. And I'm talking to the people who are the stewards of our systems. you've got to understand the process that funds these, and take the ownership of having the insight so that you can compete for the needs for both the employees that work in your utility as well as the public you serve. So just a few thoughts for your consideration.
When you talk about a champion, do you mean that that would be someone within, the utility itself, or a public works director? Or are you talking about someone within the community outside of it as an organization to kind of push the movement forward? What have you seen work more successfully?
I think when I think of a champion, I'm thinking of someone who can influence the purse strings, someone who has the knowledge and the context and the vision for the value of infrastructure as it relates to the long-term viability of a community. If when you really understand the role infrastructure plays in a community, it doesn't look like a competing need. It looks like a requirement in order to support the economy, the recreation, the quality of life that we take for granted. And that's why, I use the metaphor of the I-beams, because our communities rely on these out of sight, out of mind framework of infrastructure: water, wastewater, roads, which are a little bit more obvious for obvious reasons, and even our digital connectivity is infrastructure. And so all of this is competing for limited resources. And at the end of the day, it's about leadership is having the courage and the wisdom and the strength to think and anticipate, the reasonable outcomes based on, a true set of data. And one thing about engineering and water and wastewater is it's very real. It's not speculative at all. We know exactly what is generated in a day. We know exactly what needs to be treated in a day. And so there is no guessing. That's the beauty of the investment that's being made. Whereas in a lot of things we're hoping. Hope is a big part of the investment that's made. Whereas in infrastructure, it's very tangible accountability.
I like that. It's the numbers don't run the numbers. The numbers never lie.
Correct.
Numbers never lie. So, we talked about that attitude of not being afraid to ask for the investment and to build your case. And so what do those folks need as far as an arsenal to build their case, to tell a good story so that they can get buy-in by the policymakers, by those folks, as you were saying earlier, the ones that control the purse strings?
Yeah. So the first, it's being thoughtful. It's backing up, and a lot of things that, assumptions that we make in the industry are not obvious to others. So start there. Starting with, how much wastewater does a city of X, Y, or Z size make? Well, there are rules of thumb, and there's actual data that says for this city, for this neighborhood, you have to plan for this amount of wastewater. Just start with the and walk through the process of building a wastewater treatment plant or expanding one. And not the bricks and mortar that it's going to take to build it, but the underlying assumptions that drive how big does it need to be. Because all of that is based on human consumption, human need, the number of people that's expected. And when you begin to tie that intangible to very tangible, it begins to create a mosaic of knowledge that once it's, my view is generally once people know something and it's based on reliable data, it's not forgotten, but oftentimes, it's, we hear a need, but we don't do the root cause understanding of all the needs. And by having a deep understanding of, okay, well, if it's a 10 million gallon a day facility, it's intended to serve, or 10 million gallons a day, it's intended to serve, 100,000 people. And in order to build a 10 million gallon a day facility, it requires this level of investment. Because we want to protect that river, and because we want to protect that stream or our groundwater that we're taking for potable drinking water, and show the life cycle of water and how it relates to individual daily life.
Wow. That's a really good way of looking at it, how it affects your community, because you're in the community too. You live there too.
Yeah. And I think that, areas that are getting investment make their case very straightforward, and they do it in a way that is not complex. The keeping it simple principle matters when it comes to these things. And water and wastewater distinguishes, it is so taken for granted. And we have lived many parts of our country. We have spent the useful life of our infrastructure.
Yes, we have.
And we've enjoyed, and huge economies have been built in some of these areas that are living on 30, 40, 50-year-old wastewater. And that infrastructure, when it gives, it collapses economies.
Something that definitely something to think about. That I'm just thinking about a recent project with a sinkhole, that it was just something that happened because they just weren't aware.
Right.
And then a school bus fell into that sinkhole, and luckily the children had already been dropped off, so the bus was on its way back to the yard. The driver was okay. However, it's sad that sometimes something that extreme has to happen before we stand up and take notice and say, well, yeah, I think we need to do something about our underground infrastructure. Maybe there's a problem here. And yeah, we have to be more proactive instead of reactive. And I understand there's just so much money to go around. And so that kind of brings me around, full circle, in that you are a technology provider. You also provide services, so contracting services. So you kind of walk what we would think of the trade show, both sides of the aisle. How do you feel that, or what would, maybe you don't have an opinion on this, but I'm thinking that you probably do, or at least some ideas, is how service providers or contractors, wastewater service providers who do rehabilitation, cleaning, TV maintenance, or whatever for municipalities, as well as technology providers, who build the mechanical equipment or provide the software for the data collection or whatnot. How can we help our customers, our end users, to champion what they need to champion? Well, to help them get the funds that they need, because obviously we can't go directly, because then it would look a little self-serving.
I've heard you talk about, and I support it completely, people, planet, profit. Yes. I think it starts at some level there. For me, I became an engineer because the American Society of Civil Engineers for a long time had a people serving profession as their sort of, at least on some literature that I saw as a young person. And I would say that, I think most people figure out your intentions pretty quick. And I would say most people that are in our industry, try to do well by doing good. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we should, at the end of the day, if we're in the utility business, we're helping a utility, and if we all sort of pitch in to support their mission, and it doesn't require a lot, perhaps, oftentimes, they don't have a lot of providers doing the same thing. So in an interesting way, an individual community might have a couple of engineering firms. They might have a couple providers for this service or providers for this equipment. Perhaps at some of these, we could even have a conversation on how we can support them. Because generally, once we're serving them, we've gone through a procurement, we've gone through a selection, we've built trust, and we can have a dialogue about, hey, these are the needs of our community, and rise a little above the specific tasks and assignments that we benefit from, and talk a little bit more generally about the strategic needs and the long-term view. Most of us in business, we're looking at payroll week to week. We're looking at cash flow month to month. We're looking at performance quarterly to annually. But at the same time, I can participate in a conversation that says that, over the 5-year horizon, which is a reasonable planning period for local government, utilities particularly, is what are the needs and who do we know in the community to rally around that. The private sector, properly motivated and brought to the table in the right context, can add a lot of value to that debate. And I think that, it's worth, a pilot study around a couple places to say, hey, can we set aside our parochial short-term needs and bring our knowledge to the table, because there's a lot of policymakers and things, looking back in my policymaking days, I didn't know all that I could have known at the time to make all the best decisions, because I just didn't know. And oftentimes on the public sector side, there is a suspicion of the private sector that may or may not be justified. And
so what I'm hearing is that it's very important that everybody be educated well through content, and that the people that need to be educated the most or made to feel comfortable are those policymakers. They don't know what they don't know. And perhaps it's just simply, like you were saying earlier, they're assuming that everything is okay because nobody has bothered to bring to their attention, hey, we've got some real serious problems going on here and we need your support, because they haven't asked.
Right.
They haven't
And
asked.
I think, a lot of the public servants that I've had the privilege of meeting, particularly in our industry, they really have a servant's heart. They're trying to do the right thing. And I think if there was a way to facilitate a conversation that, was focused and rallied around the strategic needs of their utility, there's always going to be, motives and things to be vetted. But I believe that, there's a lot to be contributed when the public sector and the private sector, can gain synergy from, their shared expense, experiences, and align. There is a shared. There are aspects of this that are, there's a shared benefit and a shared. Looking for the word. But there's shared benefit and apologize.
That's okay. It becomes a win-win for all of the stakeholders.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
Win-win. That's how I saw it. And I think sometimes it also goes beyond just equipment procurement or software procurement. It's the labor that I'm hearing sometimes. It's simply just getting the funds to either hire more people or pay the people that have put in the time to get themselves certified, to learn more, to be better public servants, to reward them in order to retain them. And that's also something that needs to be, I think, folded into that mindset of it's just beyond, it goes beyond the capital equipment or the capital improvement project.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I think that, our industry, in my opinion, is poised to, for a number of reasons, and because of the experiences through COVID and other things, I think we realized how essential our industry was. And I think that, we're at a place with the right messaging and the right thought, we can take advantage of what we've learned over the last 2 or 3 years through this, trying time as a country, and make the right choices. But at the end of the day, it's going to require we cannot assume as an industry the politicians in our communities understand the value of what we do. And I think that it would be a big mistake to assume that they do. I think we owe it to ourselves in the industry to educate them to the extent that they're willing to be educated and informed about the value of what our industry is. And I believe that if you don't need everyone to understand. You need, if you have a council, you just need a couple people that appreciate the value and recognize the significant role. So it's not, if you have 5 council members, you need a couple that understand the value of this to advocate when the demands are, with competing demands. The case speaks for itself. You just can't remain silent.
Right. Well, Denver, I want to thank you. I mean, thank you for, being so candid in, the way that you explained it and shared your thoughts. There was a lot of really, words of wisdom in there, and things that I think a lot of us have to kind of sit with and, mull around in our heads and say, what is it that we need to do? If not now, when? And it's that whole thing of let it begin with me. Don't wait for the other guy to do it.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your passion for what this industry means to our country. And it's an honor to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve as well.
Well, thank you so much, because it's folks like you. This is why we started this podcast, is to get the word out, and for us as professionals in this industry to help each other to do this challenging work that we are tasked to do for our planet every single day. So again, I thank you, from my heart, for your service, your contribution to what we're all doing. And I look forward to continuing the dialogue. I know we're going to talk again about another subject, and that is, some of the technology and unique things that you are doing that are going to make things a lot better for utilities that they may not be aware of, because I love bringing on brand new technology onto the show. And so for those of you who would like to connect or learn more, you can connect with Denver on LinkedIn at Denver Stutler, or check out the company's website at ussubmergent.com or setavision.com. So again, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks so much for joining me, the DooDoo Diva, on this week's episode of Smells Like Money. What stood out to you this week? Share your takeaways by leaving me a review. You can find out more about the new technologies, creating sustainable solutions, and insights on how to succeed in our vital industry by subscribing to the show. Whether you want to learn about the latest trends in wastewater infrastructure, treatment, or trenchless, you've got it all right here at Smells Like Money. If you're an industry expert and would like to be considered as a guest for the show, book a quick chat with me by visiting calendly.com/the2it group/B-A-podcast-guest, or simply click the link in the show notes below. Until next week, a big shout out to all my industry friends and those who will be. You are my superheroes. Thanks for tuning in, keeping it flowing, and we'll see you all next week.